Everybody, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. My guest today is as beautiful as she is intelligent. She will be broadcasting live from the TrueNorth Health Center, where we've had so many of the wonderful interviews for guests that are on Chef AJ Live, and many more to come. I mean, I could interview probably one of them every day if they would let me, but unfortunately they are doctors and they're working. And she's going to tell you a little bit about herself. There's also her bio is in the show notes as well, if you'd like to read that. So as I mentioned, she works at the TrueNorth Health Center. She's one of the primary doctors there that if you ever do go there for water fasting or even not water fasting, you might have the privilege of being taken care of by her. But you know what? Dr. Goldhammer has created the website now that you can actually just easily schedule an appointment with her without having to call the front desk. You can do it online. I'm going to post that link right now. Please welcome Dr. Csilla Veress. And I said your name correctly this time.
You did. Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Definitely. Yeah. So, well, you kind of mentioned everything. So I'm a naturopathic physician. I'm also a licensed acupuncturist. I am not only a supervising physician for water only fasting at True North, but I also do outpatients. I do craniosacral. I do acupuncture appointments as well. I have done a lot of different speaking kind of gigs around, not only locally but also more nationally as well. So I'm getting out there a little bit more just because I have such an amazing kind of gift that I'm working at a place where I see healing every single day. It's hard to keep it under wraps when you have such an amazing modality at your fingertips, and that includes not only I will say water fasting, but whole food, plant-based, salt, sugar, and oil-free. Just that alone can actually cause amazing amounts of healing. So
well, maybe you can talk about that, because I'm always getting attacked for being SOS free, and people are saying you make it too hard for people to be vegan. I'm not trying to make it difficult for people to be vegan. I'm trying to make it easy for people to lose weight and recover from food addiction. And I mean, I have a song about it. SOS free is the only way to be.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I'm gonna dig in deep in my lecture, so maybe that can open up a little bit more either questions, or it can answer some questions as well. But what I will say just on that really quickly is that remember that, and it goes into the foundations of health. You cannot be optimally healthy unless the foundations of health are in place, and one of them is absolutely nutrition. Anything you put in your mouth either feeds disease or it fights disease. And that is one of the best quotes. When you know what healthy feels like, there's nothing out there that's going to taste as good as what that feels like. It really is. And I think Dr. Greger actually said that quote, and I kind of butchered it, but it was something to that effect. With the idea behind it is that, remember, we're not static, right? So everything we put in our mouth, even healthy food, is going to cause a chain reaction in our body. And what that means is that when we have a chain reaction happening in our body, we are going to have some oxidative species, which can cause damage if there's too many of them and they're around for too long, right? But the beauty of eating whole food, plant-based, SOS free is that when you are eating and you're giving yourself these amazing, like, not only phytonutrients but antioxidants and all these amazing kind of micromolecules, you are then fighting, right? Or you are battling against those oxidative stressors that is already inherent in eating, in the eating process. When you eat high sugary foods, refined carbohydrates, all the junk out there, you're not. So you're just building these toxic substances, whereas whole food, plant-based actually is helping the body. So that's kind of, let's just put that as like the ultimate, right? But then there's so many different system-wide benefits of eating whole food, plant-based. So I can actually get right into the slides if you want me.
Absolutely, because so many people think this is like a cult. And, I mean, Dr. Goldhammer couldn't have eaten this way for 40 years if he didn't enjoy his food and if it didn't have some kind of health benefits. And we love our food just as much as people that are eating all that oily, sugary, salty stuff. I promise you. Oh, addiction is my favorite subject. So I'm so excited, and stress, especially now, this is so timely.
Exactly. Well, that's why I was saying, like, maybe we should be talking about this. And I got a really good response. I did a Facebook Live on addiction. And the one thing I heard people say, which is why I kind of wanted to bring it to your audience, is that it was really helpful for people to understand how addiction can happen from a stress component, especially not only, actually, well, let me put it this way, not only in like childhood trauma or stressors in life, but just especially in what's going on today, not only with just COVID-19, but now there's a huge upheaval. Like even here in Santa Rosa last week, we had riots, right? We had not only just protesting, but we also had riots, and businesses were destroyed as well. So there is just quite a lot going on in this time period. So as I mentioned before, I always start off with the foundations of health, because I really want people to start to understand that when you are on this continuum, and if chronic illness is on one side and optimal health is on the other side, you are always oscillating back and forth. And so you need to be really in the mindset of, how do I create a lifestyle, right? And that's what whole food plant-based is. I always think of it as this way. It's like, it's a lifestyle. This is why it's simple, right? But it's sometimes not as easy to do, because of the fact that you really are changing the world around you for the best, so that you're moving towards optimal health. You can't, sleep is important, but if you're not sleeping, you're going to be increasing cravings, right? You might not be able to do the whole food plant-based. Movement is important, but if you're not sleeping, you might be too tired to move. If you're not moving, maybe there's more oxidative stress. So like I'm saying, this is all coming into play. Stress management, we're going to be talking about today. Community, we are meant to be connectors. We are connecting individuals. So if we try to stay alone, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that always say, well, I need time to retreat, and that's okay. Most of us need time to retreat, some more than others, but we also need time to connect. And that's a really powerful part of this. And then also spirit and purpose. Like, are you waking up with a sense of purpose? Are you finding flow? Are you finding joy in your day? We'll talk about all of this, but this is really an important place to kind of kickstart it. When we think about stress, one of the main things I need individuals to really understand is that this is not your body attacking itself. This is absolutely an adaptive response that actually helps you survive. So the acute stressor response, whether it's COVID-19, whether it's losing your job, whether it's wearing a mask in the supermarkets, whether it's the fact that you're worried about your business, whether or not, whatever it is, right? The bears coming at you, it doesn't matter what it is. The stress response is going to take you into fight, flight. Some people go into fawn, and some people go into freeze, right? Fawn is actually the tendency to placate. So it's like, oh, everything's okay. What can I do to help you? So some people go into that type of a stress response. What happens is that the body first releases adrenaline, and then cortisol is released. Cortisol in the short term is actually great. Short term, it's going to raise heart rate. It's going to raise your blood pressure. It's going to make your breath a little shallow, dilate your pupils. It's going to tense your muscles because you're getting ready to fight, or you're getting ready to actually run away. It's going to actually open up your pores so you can sweat and you can cool down really well. It's going to really downregulate, your thyroid function. It's going to downregulate your digestive system, your detox, because when you're in that stressor, you don't need those things. You need to survive, right? And so if you think about it, this all gets you ready to go, or to get out of that dangerous, quote unquote, dangerous situation. So it's important to start here to really understand that that's what's happening. The danger comes into play more with long-term chronic stressors. And when we think about addiction medicine, and when we go into the papers, what we are seeing is actually when we have, say, childhood stressor, or when we have childhood trauma, where that comes into play, because a lot of my patients, I would say it's 80, over 80 to 90% of patients that come to me with some sort of addiction have some major childhood trauma or major childhood stressors in play. Or I will say that they have had quite a few stressors, maybe through their 20s, 30s, something that has really come into play of where addiction is. And we're going to talk about that, because actually the American Society of Addiction Medicine has changed their definition a little bit, which is really exciting. And I'll talk about that in one second. But when we think about that, this is why it's important to understand the mechanism, the neurochemical mechanism. So trauma, long-term stressor, it becomes a wear and tear on the body. So if you have cortisol over time, think about what I just mentioned with what happens in the acute phase. If that perpetuates, you're going to start to have gut issues. You're going to start to maybe have cardiovascular issues. You're going to start to maybe have mental issues, right? Because you're so hyper focused for so long, you're not sleeping. You start to have more anxiety, more depression, that sort of thing. There's a low grade inflammation that perpetuates in the system. We start to see fat distribution changing, right? Anybody that is always, I have a lot of patients coming to me and they're like, I don't get it. You know, I'm doing whole food plant-based, I'm exercising, but why do I still have this fat around my middle, right? We do see with high levels of cortisol, because of this low grade inflammation, we do see fat distributing more towards the abdominal fat, more visceral fat, which we know then drives cardiovascular disease as well, or cardiovascular risk as well. We see hyperglycemia for all you, all the listeners out there that potentially have diabetes or prediabetes. When we're under high levels of stress, what we need is glucose in the system, right? We need to run, we need to fight, we need to be on. So what happens is we start to tap into our liver stores. We start to really release too much glucose in our system, or we release higher levels of glucose, I would say, in our system. So you do see people who are diagnosed with diabetes type 2, they're going to have higher spikes, right, of their blood sugar, especially in times of stress. And most importantly, which I think is probably really important for individuals to understand, what happens over time is that we decrease our level of serotonin and we decrease dopamine. We are much more likely, right, towards depression. We're much more likely actually towards cravings, and we're not going to be craving low concentration type foods. We're going to be craving high fat. We're going to be craving high carbohydrate concentrations like sugars as well, because what we want is we want that serotonin, we want that dopamine boost. And that is also, if many of you have probably read The Pleasure Trap, that's kind of the underlying premise behind that as well. The other thing that is really important to understand, especially with addiction, and especially because of addiction plays a role in obesity, it plays a role in food addiction, it plays a role in binge eating as well, is that the thyroid is downregulated with over long periods of time. Believe it or not, you know, this is coming from me practicing the art of medicine and understanding how the body functions on a physiological level. Many people who come to me and they're like, I think I have a thyroid issue, many times that they have a stress issue. And what I mean by that is there is now more and more patients that if they are coming to me, and even if they have some certain thyroid type symptom, I start treating the adrenals first. I start looking at the stressor piece first. I start looking at foundations of health. Many times the thyroid will correct itself. So that's a really important idea to kind of understand. To understand where this comes into play about how addictions can happen, especially food addiction. I have been having a lot of phone coaching sessions around the fact that around COVID-19, especially during this time, what's happening is not only a higher level of alcohol use, but I'm seeing a lot of people coming to me that their potentially their binge eating has been kicked up. Their addictive behaviors towards food has kicked up as well, because we're staying indoors a lot more. We are around a lot more stressors. Potentially we lost our job. Potentially we're around our husbands, wives, our kids constantly, and we're just not used to it, right? Our life is upside down basically. So to understand how this plays a role is that if you, let's go to just childhood trauma, just so we can understand how this kind of can progress. If a child doesn't know how to self-soothe because they weren't taught it, they weren't taught how to meditate, they weren't taught how to breathe deep, they weren't taught, you know, some of these other mechanisms that were taught maybe at a later stage in life, you're going to reach for the easiest, fastest way to boost your serotonin and your dopamine, because your body needs it, right? Serotonin is your self-soothing. Dopamine is your reward and survival, right? It is a survival neurotransmitter. So you're going to go quick. The quickest thing is going to be that 6-pack of beer. The quickest thing is going to be that vodka. The quickest thing is going to be that cookie. The quickest thing, and what I mean by cookie is high sugar, you know, chocolate cookie, right? Like you're going to go for the croissant, right? You're going to go for these meals because your body is super intelligent. It has known that when you first did that, it was like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I've ever felt normal, because over time, what can happen is that then it creates the spiraling effect where over time, as you then take that in, right, you have that spike, it drops. What your body is trying to do is say, hey, I just had a high. Can we get back to that high? Because that's where I want to be. I need to feel good again. And so then the cycle goes again. Unfortunately, though, this perpetuates and we start to actually deplete ourselves. What actually also happens is that we start to prime the hormones, which are called endorphins, which then also not only boost dopamine, but they also help us with pain management, right? So it then becomes this really, really dependency cycle, because of the fact that it's not even just the fact that this is something that I desire, then it's like our tissues actually depend upon it, right? So just so individuals can understand, when you look at addiction medicine, most people have tissue dependence, where it averages around 4 weeks. We have salience, which is more when you think about something that stands out, like so something that's really desirable, and it can actually be identified in identity. I don't know about a lot of you out there, but to be vulnerable, when I was in college, I mean, it was cool to go out partying and drinking, right? So and you feel more social, right? You feel like your inhibitions are down, so you can talk to more people, right? So that is where salience comes into play. If I do this, I am more accepted, so I'm going to keep on doing it, right? So it perpetuates this necessity to it. Interestingly enough, that can even come from one use, but usually it builds and builds and builds. Same thing with negative. So the more negative something is, the more that it actually becomes something that you don't want. Interestingly enough, I just had a patient tell me, and it was such a fun moment for me. And he's been on this whole food plant-based, salt, sugar, and oil-free journey for so long. And he is just a phenomenal human. And he, he's super honest, super vulnerable. And he was like, you know what? I have to be honest with you, Dr. Veress. I wanted to try marijuana one more time. He goes, because I had fun with it back in the heyday, but I really just wanted to try it. So he's like, I figured I was in a different place, and he tried it. And because he's been on this journey for so long, like he was like, it tasted awful. Like, he's like, I hated it. He's like, I hated the feeling. I hated feeling like out of control. And so he put it away, right? He was like, I should have thrown it away. He's like, I probably should have thrown it away. And then he's like, probably a week and a half later, he's like, I took it out one more time. He's like, just in case, that was the first time. He did it one more time. And he's like, nope. I hated it again. He goes, I actually hated it even worse the second time. So he just threw it away. So it was just an interesting to understand, like, this is something that works. This is something that works. And I'm not saying that it was hard work for him. Like, he's worked through the years, but it was an amazing discovery that he had. To understand too is that, when we do these substances, we're almost like stealing from ourselves, as I mentioned. So it's this perpetuating kind of negative double-edged sword type of thing that happens, because we have this lower serotonin and dopamine. We're trying to increase that. As we increase it in the quote unquote ways that drive the system too hard, too fast. And I'm sure for those of you out there that have read The Pleasure Trap or know Alan's work or know Doug's work, what happened? I mean, sugar, right? I mean, it affects us just like heroin does, like just like cocaine does. So it doesn't, and you can even look at technology today, right? Like social media, you can even look at porn. Addiction is there's multiple ways that we can look at how our body is driving these serotonin, dopamine, these needs in our body, right? When we actually drive them in this unnatural state, what happens is that we crash, we burn, and then we're also depleting ourselves of that. So then we need more. So right, at one point in time, I'm sure way back when, a bowl of ice cream, before we were maybe whole food plant-based, would have just sufficed. Now, right, I hear patients saying, I have one, I can't just have one, I have to have 5 bowls, or I have to finish something, or I'm now binging, right? And this is where the cycle happens. And it's important to understand that this is why this whole thing is happening around us, right? So what we need to do is we need to understand this, and then we need to actually come at it from a very integrative approach. This is what I was talking about. So the American Society of Addiction and Medicine in 2019, it's exciting. They actually changed their definition, and they said addiction is a treatable chronic medical disease that really does have to involve complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experiences. People with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. The important thing is the individual life experiences, because of the fact that nobody is saying that genetics doesn't create a susceptibility for many individuals, but we do know that epigenetics is very, very important when we look at especially most chronic illnesses, but definitely with addiction, with the addiction piece. Moving into then the realm of how are we kind of approaching this on an integrative support model. And so I'm always talking to patients about the foundations of health in anything that I'm doing, but with addiction specifically, just so you know, right? So with whole food plant-based, especially the salt, sugar, and oil, right? Like I said, these are not substances at the higher concentrations that our society uses them, are not like, you know, benign. They drive these responses, and they drive the chronic illness over time. Just for you to get an idea of what I'm talking about, salt in multiple studies now has been shown to drive inflammatory pathways, which actually changes something called Th17, which is autoimmune. So it can drive autoimmunity. And we know this. I mean, there's multiple studies that are showing this. So for us to say that we can just have this in our society at the quantities that we're having it is just not a correct statement anymore, right? Now that with what we know and what we're studying, when we know is that it's a matter of concentration. So people ask me all the time, well, what about fruit, right? Or what about a date? Well, when we think about it, right, a fruit and a date still have so much less of a drive on that serotonin dopamine pathways than, say, a candy bar or a soda, right? And so that is a great, and plus we have to respect the fact that fruit has multiple antioxidants, multiple phytonutrients, right? Your beautiful berries have anthocyanins in them. They're going to be they protect your vessels. They actually help rebuild your veins, right? Like the venous tissue. Good sources of starchy vegetables can be really helpful for boosting tryptophan and serotonin. Many people always tie into that Thanksgiving turkey that drives, you know, people to be really fatigued. But tryptophan, when it turns into serotonin, it becomes methylated and it turns into melatonin. Melatonin is the driver for sleep. So a lot of times I say to my patients, like, get a good source of your tryptophan. Sweet potatoes, right? Your beautiful, beautiful squashes, right? Even spinach, we can do it. There's some studies that are showing even pistachios have higher levels of walls that can drive that. So there's different food substances that can help with even boosting serotonin. Getting out into sunshine in the morning boosts serotonin. You know, making sure you're laughing. Laughter boosts serotonin. Talk about self-soothing, right? These are just lifestyle things that can really help. Talking about hormonal balance and whole food plant-based. Hormonal balance can absolutely shift addiction. Here's how. If you think about it, estrogen, progesterone, DHEAS, progesterone, testosterone, all of them have their different play on serotonin and dopamine. Some of them are serotonin agonists, which actually push serotonin. Some of them actually push dopamine pathways. So you need these hormones to be in regulation. If they are not, you can have then further neurotransmitter dysregulation, right? So there is this interplay. And guess what also regulates your hormones? Your microbiome. Where is one of your biggest microbiome? areas, it's like one of the biggest areas where microbiome is that it's in your gut, right? So one of the best ways, I mean, I'm telling you, I don't even have to fast individuals. Just one of the best ways that women especially can regulate their menstrual cycles, regulate endometriosis, regulate fibroids, I mean, anything across the board, with whole food plant-based, right? One of the other ways that that is helpful, not only in the microbiome support, but also think about your liver. Your liver is what packages that estrogen to release it out into the system. Many, many conditions, especially when we look at addiction type medicine, if you have your hormones all over the place, you are going to be craving more foods, right? You're going to be craving chocolate during your menses. You're going to be craving your croissants during your menses. That is not normal, right? Many people think PMS is normal. It's common. It's not normal. So what's happening is we need to fix the hormonal level. And one of the best ways, like I said, is whole food plant-based. Your fasting actually works really well. Lifestyle, stress reduction, stress management. We're going to talk about that. And I already mentioned this, but just as another layer or another level, when we eat whole food plant-based, right, we absolutely improve our gut microbiome. There is no, I'm going to say this, and I'm getting fired up because this is one of the coolest and most amazing things that we see in research out there. There is no research study out there that disputes, right, the fact that plant-based foods are the best thing for your microbiome. The best thing, right? If you want to drive dysbiosis, if you want to drive more unhealthy diversity in your microbiome, more kind of issues with just unhealthy gut bacterium, eat more meat, right? Eat more dairy, eat eggs, eat, like, I mean, there's a ton of literature out there that's showing that the best way to actually combat this is whole food plant-based. So that's exciting. That's super exciting. So, and just so you know too, if we're having healthy diversity of candida, of bacterium, of viruses, of fungi and other kinds of fungi in our microbiome, we are then going to be producing not only the necessary signals to be driving these hormonal pathways, these neurotransmitter pathways, but certain types of microorganisms actually produce serotonin. They produce dopamine, right? They can help us. They can help us with taste adaptation. So we don't need salt, sugar, and oil, right? They can help us manipulate vagus tone, right? If we're helping our vagus nerve, what's happening is our leptin and our ghrelin are going to be regulated. What is our leptin or ghrelin? Leptin tells us we're full. Ghrelin tells us that we're hungry. If we have higher ghrelin baseline, then we're always hungry. We're always craving food, right? So like if you think about how this interplays in all of this and even in addiction, it's huge. It's huge. So right there, just if you change your diet, you're managing this so immensely. I mentioned this at the start. I've been saying this since the start of COVID-19. I wish that they would have started calling it physical distancing instead of social distancing, because what I have heard and what I am seeing in my practice is that people are actually social distancing, not just physical distancing. And that is absolutely what's driving probably anxiety, depression. It is driving a lot of mental illness. We are meant to be interacting with other individuals. That's how we're designed, right? If you want to look at even the stress response, when we are stressed out, we release oxytocin, not oxycontin.
Don't you wish?
Oxytocin, but we're releasing oxytocin. Oxytocin is actually a hormone that allows us to find another human to bond with, right? We know about it with the baby and the mother, right? That's how we usually hear about it. The beauty of it in a stress response, right, is that we then make more of this hormone, right? When we make more of this hormone, it actually becomes cardioprotective on us during stressful situations. So if we're stressed, if we're depressed, if we feel alone, we need, I mean, one of our beautiful tools is to get out there and really connect with somebody. You know, with the social distancing or the physical distancing, you know, we can call people, Zoom, you know, we can definitely find ways that we can start to connect more, or, you know, you can get with people, maybe just make sure that you're 6 feet apart, right? And lifestyle shifts, it goes back to the foundations of health, right? We do know that exercising daily can actually cut cravings, or that immediate impulse control that happens with cravings and addiction. So exercising is really powerful. Any mind, body, spirit kind of support. And what I mean by this is that, what are the things that bring you joy every day? What brings you into a state of flow? Do that. Find what it is and do that. Maybe for some people it's artwork. Maybe for some people it is their work because they love what they do. I mean, when I am seeing patients, I'm in my state of flow. I can say I love going to work. I love what I do. And so for me, it's that state of flow, right? Purpose. What is a goal out there that you haven't created or you haven't done? Is that what's I have just to give you an idea about how this can run into addiction, right? I just talked to this beautiful, beautiful woman. She is a teacher. She's soon to be retired. She gave up her entire life, quote unquote. She loves teaching, but she gave up so many of her dreams and aspirations to become a teacher. It is admirable because we need teachers and we need passionate teachers like that, but it actually has costed her, right? Part of her addiction cycle is because of the fact that while she loves she loved what she's done, she doesn't have a relationship in her life. She doesn't have as many friends. She's had all these different goals, and I said, let's start working on one of these goals and making sure that you're getting into that piece of life, right? And this is a big one too, especially when we think about childhood trauma. Many times we tell a story, right? We, from that stressor or that specific interaction, many times that we made up a story. I am not enough. I am not worthy of love. I am not beautiful, right? You deserve love. You deserve to be cherished. You deserve to be respected, and you deserve it right now. Not when you lose 10 pounds, not when you lose 50 pounds, not when you get that promotion. You deserve it right now. When I work with individuals, one of the biggest things that will help you, right, that will help you not drive down this negative spiraling is come at it with a lot of self-love. If you had, like, say you fall off the wagon and you have a chocolate chip cookie, be with yourself in that moment. Enjoy that chocolate chip cookie. Just be there and then love yourself and then come out of it. Because what I see, right, and then come out of it, go back into whole food, plant-based, no salt, sugar, and oil. The reason I'm saying that is because when an individual starts hating on themselves, when they're like, I can't believe I just did this. I can't believe I'm that stupid. I can't believe it. I'm going to gain 5 pounds. You know the spiral that we can go down on, right? When we start going down that spiral, then we start to say to ourselves the stories that we said before. I'm not worth it. What's the point? I'm going to eat the whole bag. What's the point? I'm going to actually then go to Ben and Jerry's, right? Whatever it is. And so it changes the dialogue. It's not the only thing. Like I said, this is an integrative support. You have to do a lot of this. It's just one of the pieces that has to be attuned to. Perfectionism can be really toxic. Many of the patients I work with are type A type personalities, right? They need to be perfect. Everything needs to be done. That can become very toxic. When we start to let go, when we stop trying to reach this unattainable level of perfection, right? We start to then show up for ourselves. We start to have a little bit more self-love is what I found. And then of course, mindfulness. This can be heart math meditations. This could be, the Vipassana, which is breath work. This could be chanting. This could be any type of meditation. Meditation changes how you look at the world. It changes how you approach stressors as well. And then of course, there's other modalities that you can be doing. At TrueNorth, as I mentioned, I do acupuncture, craniosacral. I see super powerful results with that. There's visceral manipulation. We also do like chiropractic, reflexology, massage, right? Like as I was talking about, sometimes with stress, we have that muscular tension over time, biofeedback. And then of course, there's always counseling, there's tapping, there's EMDR, which is a rapid eye movement technique. There's so many ways, right, that we can really come at it with multiple different modalities. I put this one slide in there because I just want to touch on it. talk to your doctor. I'm not going to go into, there's a ton more of not only supplements, but also herbal botanical medicine that can go into helping with addiction support. And I use this if it's necessary. Like I said, I usually start off with mostly foundations of health, counseling, those kinds of things, and the modalities that I just mentioned. But if somebody needs something in the moment, especially with what just happened, I mean, if you think about it, this is not just, a town that went through this. This is the world, right? This is the world that went through this. And in that sphere, whether or not, I always say this, like, whether or not you are attuning to the fact that that's a stressor. And what I mean by that is that I've asked people and I'm like, well, how are you perceiving stress in your life? And they're like, oh, it's great. It's great. I'm working from home. It's fantastic. Like, I love it. Like, okay. And that is absolutely, I'm not saying that that is not a true statement, because there are a lot of people that even during this time are thriving, which is phenomenal. But when you go out there, there is a level, right, of stress that is in place. And when I speak of it, people are like, oh yeah, you're right. Like, how many people do I know that have gotten kicked out of grocery stores because they didn't have their mask on them, right? How many people do I know that feel like their level of freedom has been taken away from them because they have to stand on these designated spots while they stand in line? How many people have I talked to that that maybe aren't as sensitive, but we're all struggling, right? Everybody is struggling a little bit more in different ways during this time. Some people are really sensitive because of the fact that their businesses were rioted against. Some people, but if you know a friend of a friend, right? So what I'm trying to say is that there is this level that needs to be attuned to. And ashwagandha, it's a beautiful adaptogen. It can really help cut cravings because of the fact of how it works on the stress response. Skullcap is really nutritive for the nervous system. It's a great calming one. You can get it as a tea, super safe. Super safe. It really doesn't interact with any kind of medications. Always check with your doctor though. Bitters, this is something you could take before meals. It really helps with absorption. It can actually cut any kind of reversions, especially if you're an individual that maybe has been drinking more alcohol since what has happened because of the stressor. Kudzu is actually like a root that is out there, and it can be used as a thickener. So you can actually put it in foods, and it's plant-based. It's, like I said, it's a root. It can actually reduce sugar and alcohol cravings, and it boosts dopamine levels. So that's kind of an overview, and that's kind of how I approach addiction. So hopefully for those of you who maybe didn't see my Facebook Live, got something really powerful out of that.
Wow, that was amazing. So say that again, Ashtwanga, is it?
Ashwagandha, yeah.
And where do you get it, and how much do you take, and when do you take it? Does it need to be prescribed by a doctor?
It does not need to be prescribed by a doctor. It is a botanical medicine that you can get at, here we have Oliver's or Whole Foods. It can be found online. It can be found on Welevate if you are part of TrueNorth. It is a beautiful, it's actually part of the Solanaceae family. So if you know, just out there, if you know that you are pretty highly intolerant to potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, this is probably not the adaptogen for you. But if you do fine with them, then what you can do is you can find them in supermarkets. I usually recommend anywhere from 300 to 600 milligrams per day. And then you could take that in divided doses, like once in the morning, once at night. It does not affect your sleep. Actually, if anything, it's going to help you sleep through the night. So yeah.
That's nice. Do you have time for a couple questions? Some were sent in through our mailing list and some are being posted live.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the first one's on one of my favorite subjects as the host of the upcoming GI Health Summit, poop. And this person has to remain anonymous. And the question is, how do you handle all the bathroom trips? I poop 6 to 8 times a day, and it is very inconvenient. When I have to go, I literally have a minute to find a bathroom. This is not because of diarrhea, but because the high fiber and water content of things make it so voluminous and heavy. This has made the house stressful. Is this normal for people eating this way?
What great question. So Couple things that I will mention. One is if you have just changed over your diet to whole food plant-based, it absolutely can be a normal process of your body and your microbiome as well adjusting to the change. That's one thing. Number two is the fact that I would look at what you're eating. You can be doing whole food plant-based, but potentially you might need some more binders in there. And what I mean by binders is maybe some of those beautiful whole food or whole grains, right? So like rice, basically like brown rice. Every now and then, maybe have a little bit more brown rice. I'm not a huge component of like bananas because they're higher on the glycemic index. But in your case, maybe doing like a banana or two like during the week can be really helpful because again, it's a binder. So one of the things that you just want to play around with is what quantity of different foods that you're eating. The other thing is, you know, if you have pain, right? If you have blood, if it's starting to become really uncomfortable, get it checked out for sure. I mean, it's definitely common and it does happen with changes in your diet. But if it starts to become like where it's really, really uncomfortable, you do want to get it checked out just to make sure that there's not something underlining that, right? The other thing that you can do and probiotics are something that are really, really, really helpful with diarrhea. But potentially because your microbiome is shifting and changing so much, sometimes probiotics can be really helpful, even in multiple bathroom trips. But first, what I would do is add the binders. Number two is like, just give it if you just transition, give it a little bit of time.
Yeah, I don't think this person has, but I'm not, yeah.
Okay.
So, all right, terrific. So Nancy says, would you recommend hormone replacement treatment for a woman who had a hysterectomy and went through menopause early, like in their 20s and 30s?
Not necessarily. It would depend upon what type of symptoms you're having. Also, what type of, why, did she mention why she went through?
Nancy, if you're still watching live, maybe you could provide some extra feedback. She did not say.
Why you had to have the hysterectomy as well. What I usually do first and foremost is do foundations of health. Like I just mentioned, food has a huge power play in regulating hormones, even after a hysterectomy. It also depends upon whether or not you had your ovaries taken out as well as your uterus in that. And I'm not sure if when you said full, if you really meant actual complete or not. And then the other thing is too, is that what I would be looking at is just, you can use a lot of botanical medicine in order to help with that. If that is not helping with symptom profile, or if that's not helping fully, you absolutely can go into bioidentical hormones. I always counsel my patients on that because like I said, there's nothing wrong with going on bioidentical. It's more about, are these going to give you a better quality of life, right? Or are they going to be somehow protective that is some way, shape, or form we can't do more naturally? So those are the questions that I'd be asking.
So she says, I'm sorry for interrupting. She says it was cancer, surgery, higher rates of Alzheimer's, and yes, her ovaries were removed.
Okay. So then it might be, and cancer, I would say, would be like a female hormone type, an estrogen kind of positive type of cancer. So you just have to be pretty careful in that case, just because, again, when you're giving bioidentical hormones, right, you have to make sure, and I always reassess my patients in 5 years, just because you have to make sure that you're not driving, right, different types of hormonal pathways so that you can increase risk down road.
And the person that asked the frequent poop question says they've been eating this way for 6 years.
For 6 years. Well, there could be, then what I would definitely do more of is more of the binders, just kind of play around with that. And actually, the other thing is try a little bit of probiotics just to see, if that can actually help it. And then to get it, if you haven't gotten it checked out, I would definitely get it checked out a little bit. You can also use, believe it or not, like sometimes like chia seeds can also be helpful because they're binding. If you put them in a lot of water, they can actually, because of the high fiber, they can actually push it. But if you're using a little bit of it, it can be a binder as well.
There is a question like, what's the best time to take probiotics?
At night. before bed. So you really, more and more studies are coming out that we thought at one point in time that we should be taking it with food, but we're finding that if we're taking it at night, there's a little bit of better efficacy with them. So
nice. Radha, who's watching live, says that even though she's been whole food plant-based, she still binges when she's stressed.
mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that goes back to everything I talked about. Rhonda, the point with the foundations of health is that a lot of my patients are whole food plant-based and they're salt, sugar, and oil free. And they still have some issues. And it really, really takes looking at the body is a complex system. So it's really not just, right? The food is a huge component, but it's not just the food. It's like, are you sleep? My question would be like, are you sleeping, right? If it is in the times of stress, what are you doing in those times that is helping you through that time? Like, are you bringing joy into your life? Are you doing work that you love? Are you exercising? If the stressor is really long standing or maybe into childhood, have you been kind of working through some of that? And then, like I said, sometimes it's about how are we balancing serotonin and dopamine. So doing different types of serotonin boosts. Like I said, getting out into sunshine, going for walks, getting laughter in place, meditation. These are things that are going to help raise naturally the serotonin dopamine levels. And so you're not going to be as interested, right? Or you're not going to be as impulsive. That's my word I was looking for. Impulsive towards reaching these. The other thing that I would say is really helpful is neuro-linguistic type of work. And what I mean by that is that sometimes you have to break neurological patterns. So one of the things, like I said, is that if you remember back to like the reward pathway, your body is super intelligent. It knows, like it's saying, I am stressed. My dopamine, serotonin are going down. Remember when you picked up that cookie before? Your dopamine, right? That's what your dopamine, it's a survival. It's saying, remember when you picked up that cookie? We felt really good. I want you to get back there. So it's going to go quick. It's going to go easy. Sometimes it's about breaking that. So it's about breaking that cycle. And sometimes I'll just have people do crazy things. Like if you're walking to the refrigerator to go get something, you know what? Just stop and get down on the floor and do 10 push-ups, right? Or start breaking into a dance or something like that. Sometimes just that break in that processing, because sometimes it's this, right? It's like, I need that hit. I'm going to go, I'm going to grab, I'm going to eat. It's going to shoot up, drop down, go. So it's a pattern. It's a habit that starts to form. So sometimes just breaking that habit can actually be really, really powerful, in addition to supporting yourself in other ways, right? This is where potentially like the ashwagandha can come into play. This is potentially where the skull cap, just to help with the stress levels, can come into play. This is where, like I said, getting out and exercising, things like that can really help.
Right. Naomi says, can you recommend a good probiotic to take? And somebody is on magnesium at night and wanted to know if they can take it if they're already taking magnesium for sleep.
Yeah, you can definitely take magnesium and the probiotic together. Yeah, great probiotic. There's a couple of really good ones out there. The one that I really, really love, Claire Labs is a really good one. And you can look up on their website. They have a few different types, depending upon what, somebody needs, like in the listener who called in, there's a Therabiotic Complete, which has quite a few different strains in it. So that would be a good one to use just to try.
Nice.
The other one is, if you can't find that one, Pure Encapsulations has a probiotic 5, which is really great too. So.
Great. This is moving fast. So let's see. Sorry about that. Well, while I'm looking for some more questions, what's been like the most amazing story you've seen at TrueNorth with one of your patients? Like that you just thought, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. You know what? I just had a follow-up I just had a follow-up actually with one of my patients, which I did mention on a different summit, but it's just so powerful that I'll talk about it. But it was a young woman that had ulcerative colitis. She was literally for years has not been able to get off her prednisone because every time she tries to get off prednisone and her medications, she would go into a cycling of flare where she would have blood and mucus and multiple stools, diarrhea. So I started working with her to get her off the prednisone and started putting her on a good supplemental program so that we can balance out the inflammation. When she got into TrueNorth to do her fast, she was able to get off the prednisone. We got her into a fast. She did really well in the fast. She did around 21 days. After the fast, no flares, which is phenomenal. And I just followed up with her 6 months. It was a 6-month follow-up, and I'm happy to report that it was the first time in I think it was like 5 or 6 years, something like that, where she's been flare free for this long. So she has her quality of life back, and she's whole food, plant-based, no salt, sugar, and oil. I mean, she's thriving. She's loving it. I mean, the conversation was just like her saying she never thought she'd ever get to this point in her life ever. You know, she was thinking about, you know, she might not have kids ever. She was thinking about potentially the fact that like she never would have, you know, an ability to, you know, have her work, whatever, you know. So yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Maybe, excuse me, if you're around in 45 years, maybe we can do a 50-year follow-up.
I love it. I love it.
Absolutely. Well, you'll be around. I don't know. I don't know. I'll be 105. So if I'm still doing the show, of course. That's funny. Joy says, what if antibiotics have destroyed the bacteria that you need?
Well, that's a really good question. So antibiotics, you have, unfortunately, a way of changing your microbiome. And so two of the best things you can potentially do to help that is, number one is whole food, plant-based, right? That's one of the best ways. You're going to get a lot of your prebiotic types foods, like your leeks, your Jerusalem artichokes, artichokes in general, garlic. These are prebiotic type foods. These will be helpful. And then on top of it, I do, depending upon the antibiotic and depending upon how long a person's been on it, I do put people on probiotics afterwards for a period of time. So anything in the foundations of health, we can tie it back to microbiome health. So one of the other things to do is, if you have high levels of stress, you need to be working on your stress management. If you're not sleeping, you got to be working. You got to be talking to a doctor about sleep management. All of this goes back into how healthy your microbiome is. So it's not just this one-step approach, like you just have to eat right, or you just have to put in these supplements. It's about what is affecting the microbiome negatively, and we have to remove those obstacles and then really rebuild the foundation. So
nice. M.A. Rose says, what do you do about adrenal fatigue?
Ooh, good question. So it depends. And when you say adrenal fatigue, there is multiple levels to that. So if I'm doing a cortisol panel on you, it can go from anywhere where there is literally like the initiating start of just high cortisol. You can actually get into a resistance stage where you're having high cortisol for extended periods of time, or you can actually go into quite a pretty intense fatigue, exhaustion, where you're not producing cortisol. And then there's different patterns that can happen. So adrenal fatigue can look like just a dysregulation in how your body and when your body's producing cortisol. And so I'm not trying to avoid the question, but it's a little bit deeper than that. And what I can say, if we take a step back though, depending upon what your cortisol panel looks like, and just taking into account maybe what you've been through, we can do botanicals. We can do supplements, like perfect example is B6, magnesium. These are different things, cofactors that are needed. I always do whole food, plant-based. We're going to be looking at what's going on with your sleep. You know, why is there adrenal exhaustion, fatigue? What's going on in your life? Where is the piece that we can kind of start to unravel or manage a little bit better, right? Every now and then too, getting into a water fast can be really helpful. That is a base by base case, because if you're in a really intense exhaustion, potentially water fasting is not for you, but that's another option just to help the body heal. So, exercise, if you're in extreme exhaustion, you can't be exercising too much, but if you have just a little bit of higher cortisol levels, getting out to nature, making sure you're walking every day can be helpful. So
Terrific. Melanie says this is great information, and that you mentioned skull cap to calm the nervous system. Could that be used to support the nervous system in someone with chronic fatigue?
yes, absolutely. Any kind of, with chronic fatigue, there's a huge, well, and you might know this already, Melanie, but there's a huge factor that is a dysregulation with the amygdala, and also a couple of different type of central brain pathways, right? And so what's happening is, if and it a lot of times has to do with, right, this starting point of intense stressor or some kind of trauma as well. We see that in chronic fatigue. We also see that in fibromyalgia. So if we are then like kind of looking at this as a multifactorial or more of an integrative approach, I'm always working on the nervous system with chronic fatigue, always. I'm always working on mitochondrial support. I'm always working on the adrenals. So there's these pieces, and sometimes there's, one of them takes precedence over the other, but I'm always looking at that. So yes, for sure.
Great. Wanda says she's having a dental procedure and the dentist is requiring just that day for her to take antibiotics. Is that okay?
If it's just a one day.
Well, she's saying before teeth cleaning. So I've never heard that for a teeth cleaning, but maybe she has something going on.
Yeah, I've never heard that. If it's a one, you know what? I will have to honestly research that, because I've never heard of them giving it to you just for a day. I would say that I'd be dubious about that. Really, like I really would be dubious about it. Even with a dental procedure, you can actually use some amazing kind of natural support. And just to say this, if you are really living a healthy lifestyle, and you have to take antibiotics for a reason, take them. Like, I mean, I personally do not have anything against antibiotics or medications, in the sense of if they're being used appropriately. They are life saving. They can be life saving. What I have more of a concern about is how they're being used, and whether or not they're being used in an appropriate sense. So that's why I would be asking your dentist, why is it just a one-day protocol? And if it's more prophylactic, really talk to them about like berberine. Berberine is a great one. Golden seal. You can do a little bit of a mouth rinse. It's an antimicrobial. It's gonna be really, really effective to helping if he's really worried about some kind of bacterium or infection, that sort of thing. So talk to your doctors. A lot of them, I just had a dermatology appointment, and she was phenomenal. I mean, I talked to her about, herbs and medications and all this stuff, and she was so open. So there's a lot more, and she talked to me about nutrition. She didn't know a lot about nutrition, but she was like interested. So there's a lot more doctors that are kind of looking more at this holistic approach. So
well, it seems like a lot of people have stress that are watching, because Caroline says, I normally have nice skin, but get cystic acne when very stressed. I'm in this endless cycle of getting stressed about getting stressed. How can I end the vicious cycle for the sake of my skin? Maybe you need to teach a stress management course.
I know that's a really good. Well, I'm kind of creating a course right now for longevity. One of them is going to be stress management. So it's coming. It's coming. It's just that you probably know, Chef AJ. It takes a little bit of time to create these courses. So it's coming though. It'll be up on my website for sure.
So have you heard about getting cystic acne when stressed?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Wow. So it goes back to if you remember. I'm sorry. Was it Caroline?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you remember back to when I was talking about a whole food plant-based, I brought up hormonal components of it. So what can happen with stress again is that you have an interplay. So when we think about how the body functions as a whole, it's not only, right, not only this chronic inflammation, low-grade inflammation from the cortisol that can be part and parcel of this, we have to think about how it affects our microbiome. So if we start having chronic inflammation in our microbiome, we're not balancing hormones appropriately. If we're not balancing hormones appropriately, that's where we start to have cystic acne. A lot of times, I don't know if this is you, Caroline, but like a lot of times if we have cystic acne and it's around our mouth or in our chin area, right along the bottom portion, that's very hormonally related. So what I would say is that it's really about getting into stress management, finding what it is for you that is going to help kind of level off that cortisol. Maybe it's meditation. Maybe you hate meditation. I love Heart Math. Heart Math actually has a really beautiful website and a good meditation for that. So I love that. Sometimes for some people it's walking, hiking. For some people it's getting a pet, right? Artwork, journaling, anything like that. So it's just about finding what's going to be the best for you. So.
Wait, you seem like if you have stress, you seem to mitigate it very well. Cause you're one of the few people I follow on Instagram, and you're always so positive, and you're always, you just have these lovely kind of like little video things that you put up.
Well, I have a lot of stress in my life too, but I really try to practice what I preach. I really do. I am by far the least perfect person out there in the entire world, and I'll be the first to admit it. But like perfect example is I've been working till midnight on treatment plans for the last 2 days, and last night I was like, nope, Csilla, you are putting yourself to bed. Go to bed at 9, So I, when I find myself getting out of this pattern spiraling, like I do the things like I'll put patient treatments aside for a second and I'll go for a walk. This weekend I'm getting out of town because I need it, so I'm really, I look at, I'm like, I always say to myself, if I was my patient, what would I do? So I really try to walk my walk, talk my talk. I've been eating salads like crazy. I've been eating sweet potatoes like crazy because I know this is what's going to help my body survive through this. I really been like, no sugar. I've even decreased on fruit. So, it's just little things like that where they really add up and they make a huge difference. So.
Well, you look amazing. You look like you just got out of college. So
you did too, woman.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. So her Instagram, I've typed it in several times, but it's at her name, NDLAC, right?
So yes.
Okay.
I had it on my beginning slide. Yes.
Your name is a mouthful. So, it's interesting because at Dr. Goldhammer, he never seems to get stressed. And if he does, he sure never shows it.
Yeah. I think all of us get stressed. I just think that people have a way. I think when you have the foundations of health in place, which he does too, I think you have a better way of just kind of working through them, which seem like, you're not stressed, but
Right. One of the things he always says is stress is like Christmas. It's far better to give than to receive. Well, thank you so much. It's just such a pleasure talking to you, and your presentation was amazing. And I can't wait for the people that couldn't watch live to watch it on YouTube. And please, tell your patients to watch it because it will be there momentarily.
I absolutely will. Thank you for having me on.
Oh my God, anytime, seriously. And thank you guys so much for watching. Now, tomorrow is an exception because this was booked a long time ago. Instead of 11, it is going to be 3 p.m. We have Dr. AJ Shah back with his wife, Jay Shri, and they're going to be doing a cooking demo, SOS-free Indian food. So tomorrow only, Saturday, June 13th, it's at 3 p.m. Thank you so much again, Dr. Veress. Say hi to everybody at TrueNorth for me.
Well, I will. Goodbye. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.